This is the Jocko podcast, Civil War Excursion, number 2, with J.D. Baker and me, Jocko Willink. Good evening, J.D.
Good evening, Jocko.
Soldiers of the Army of the Mississippi, I have put you in motion to offer battle to the invaders of your country. With the resolution and discipline and valor becoming men fighting, as you are, for all worth living or dying for, you can but march to a decisive victory over the agrarian mercenaries sent to subjugate you and to despoil you of your liberties, your property, and your honor. Remember the precious stake involved. Remember the dependence of your mothers, your wives, your sisters, and your children on the result. Remember the fair, broad, abounding land and the happy homes that would be desolated by your defeat. The eyes and hopes of 8 millions of people rest upon you. You are expected to show yourselves worthy of your lineage, worthy of the women of the South, whose noble devotion in this war has never been exceeded in any time. With such incentives to brave deeds, and with the trust that God is with us, your generals will lead you confidently to the combat, assured of success. And that right there is General Albert Sidney Johnson giving a speech that was given to each regiment as they approached the Battle of Shilo, which is gonna be kind of the first really big battle in the Civil War. JD, how do we get there? Last episode, we left off after Fort Sumter, and Lincoln is thinking, and I guess it's a fair assessment to say that Fort Sumter was kind of like a 9/11 moment, September 11th moment for the North, because 1860, the Army, you talked about this the last episode. Army was tiny, really. I mean, in 1860, there was 16,000 total men and officers on the roll. Only 14,000 of them were present for duty. There was 5 general officers total. Most of the soldiers were posted west of the Mississippi. There's only 16 companies east of the Mississippi. This is just, so in 1860, the military is just absolutely tiny. Well, how many people are stationed on Camp Pendleton, California?
Oh, thousands.
I mean, how about what Marine Corps base did you spend the most time on?
Lejeune.
How many people on Lejeune, you think?
Oh, at least 35,000 folks.
Yeah. So in one base, there's twice as many people as there are soldiers before the war kicked off. So there, September 11th happens, which is Fort Sumter. And now it's on. Now, that being said, and I'd say this about September 11th too, people think, okay, well, the war is going to kick off, but the war, what are we talking? Maybe a few months, 4 or 5 months, maybe to go down south, beat back the Confederacy, we'll take everything back over. Is that what we're thinking up north?
Oh yeah, I mean this is probably if you're looking at it on that aspect, it's like a 90-day. Like hey, it's a 90-day. Like hey man, I could imagine with the amount of sources available, like going through there. I mean, when you say like 5 general officers, there's probably like 5 general officers sharing a cubicle right now in the Pentagon. In 2022, you know what I mean? Like that just always is shocking. So when you're looking at the professional soldier, it does take a lot. You get done with the Mexican-American War. Yeah, everything is out west because of Western expansion. So they've got a lot of these armies and stuff and companies that are out west. And it's a lot dealing with the Native Americans. and protection for these folks that are moving west with Western expansion. If you're looking at the aspects of the size of the Army and the comparison of Pearl Harbor, even Abraham Lincoln is kind of looking like, I mean, he's wanting them to bombard Fort Sumter because now that's going to give him Northern buy-in. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
so he had a little bit of that. He wanted that. It's not a false flag attack, but he wanted it to get attacked so he could use it as some propaganda to start getting some troops massed up.
Right, because I kind of look at it as if, okay, you've got all these states, and they decide that they're just going to secede from the Union. So we're all, so South Carolina, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, Virginia, they're all going to pop smoke. And as the President of the United States, you're like, well, we're going to stand up an army, and we're going to go down there, and we're going to bring them back into the Union. And people are like, well, they haven't really done
Meanwhile,
anything.
some dude in New Hampshire's like, bro, I'm not going anywhere. What are you talking about? They want to leave? I'm up here. I got work to do.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And they haven't really done anything. They're just talking right now. You know what I mean? So it's more like, oh, the states, they're just saying that. They're not really going to leave. But they are. They're like leaving, but no shots have been fired yet. So it's almost like the same thing before we can, even when you look at the Mexican-American War, I mean, they sent Zachary Taylor down there to kind of monkey around the Rio Grande. They pop a couple of shots. They send a memo back up, which was, up to D.C., let the President of the United States, hey, man, we're under fire. Go to Congress, declare war. Boom. We're in the Mexican-American War. So somebody's got to pull the trigger here. You know what I mean? If, obviously, there was problems that were known prior to September 11th, that there was bad people.
Yep.
You know what I mean? That's probably a fair thing to say, that in the United States, we knew that there were individuals outside the United States that wanted to cause harm. But as the United States, we didn't just go over there and just raise an army and invade their country. They've just done a lot of talk. You know what I mean? And they haven't really threatened American soil yet. So as the president, you kind of got to get some buy-in. So as soon as, the old man pulls the lanyard, you know what I mean? Dude, we just got Northern buy-in, because they're like, wait a minute. They just bombarded American soldiers at a federal fort in the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina. Yeah, we're done with this little Confederacy thing you guys think you're going to plan up there. So now we're in. So you can see that, as Lincoln being the President of the United States, now when he goes to his northern folks and he's looking for a raising of arms to come join into this fight, he's going to get a lot more buy-in.
Right.
So that's basically what's happening. So, Lincoln, you know what I mean, Sumter is that's his 9/11.
Now, he's, like you said, like a 90-day. Okay, it's going to take 90 days. We're going to go down there. We're going to kick the shit out of some people. And it's all going to be good. We'll come back home. So their primary initial raising of troops is like National Guard guys, right? Bringing guys on for like a 90-day enlistment type thing.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Because, the whole, you know what I mean? The militia. That has been in existence. Hell, it's still in existence today. You know what I mean? You're going to stand the right to bear arms. You know what I mean? Was literally like meant something back then. Meaning, you got the rifle hanging over top of the fireplace, and you use it during hunting season. But if there's a call to arms, you're a part of the militia. Everybody's from the same little hometown, and you're going to stand up and you're going to join in with the company, and then that company's got a regiment in the States, and they're going to send these folks down south to kind of quell this insurgency that's kind of taking place. So, 90 days max, you know what I mean? But then you got to look at like moving bodies. Okay, how do you move them? It's either by water or it's by rail, or they're going to walk. And then they got to get their stuff, and then you got to have stuff to supply them, because you're going to have to feed them, you're going to have to clothe them. So it's a lot more. You know what I mean? When you kind of look at the aspects of, hey, we're going to stand up an army. Even a small army. And then you have to look at it as like you had said earlier, like the dude in New Hampshire. He's like, dude, I got a job. Like, you know what I mean? I run a gym in SoCal, man. I got to be at work tomorrow. You know what I mean? I got like 9 kids at home. Like, you know what I mean? What, I'm just going to pop smoke. We're going to go down there. But then again, you got to look at it on the aspect of like the 9/11 of like, I mean, you remember the recruiting offices. You know, in the United States military after 9/11, we were not having a recruiting problem.
No. Freaking Tim Kennedy, he was like, he went down to the recruiting officer September 12th, and like the line was around the block, you know, and that's just one example, and that's in California, right? That like it was on.
Yeah, and you remember like all the guys that like, because you and I served in the same time frame of like all the guys that came in, like, and so they missed Desert Storm, and then there's like this dry spell. You know what I mean?
That's me.
Yeah, there's like these little kind of hot pocket things that are kind of happening around the world. But if you're not on a specific unit and a specific team at a specific time, you're just going to miss it. And you know, so now you got these guys that are like, well, it doesn't look like anything's going to happen in the next 4 years. I'm going to get out and I'm going to go back home, you know, go to college or just get a job. And I'm kind of done with the military thing. And then bam, 9/11 hits. And then these guys are like, dude, I want back in. You know what I mean? So now that's even a problem. Then it's like, dude, I got skill sets. Okay, well, you left as a sergeant. You know what I mean? We can't bring, dude, I don't care if you bring me back as a private rifleman. You know what I mean? I just want to be on the big bird that's going to cross the pond. And we're going to bring the wood to these people that did these events in New York, in the fields in Pennsylvania, and to the Pentagon. So I could imagine, you know, back then when the word got out, you know what I mean, of looking at the aspects of they just bombed, you know what I mean, a federal installation. That's the same as if it would happen today. I mean, there would be a call to arms. The President of the United States is, no matter who the president is, like you're going to get backed by the American people. They're going to back you at this event. This is unjust. So yeah, when we left off the last time, and then you look at those, you know, the totals that are there. So, you know, they're and I wouldn't even. I think that, you know, you and I, we're using the references of the National Guard, but these guys aren't even at that level. Like these are just like novice guy. You know, they just come out and it's kind of cool to be. It's a drinking club. It's like a volunteer fire department. You know what I mean? Like it's a cool place to hang out, but. You know what I mean? We're really not going to go to war. It's just fun to go, and you know, I get away from the wife and the kids for a couple of days, and you know what I mean. And so I'm going to come out. Plus, you could imagine, you know, if you think this is going to be like a quickie, like you don't want to be the only guy that hung back. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like when everybody's flying the flags and stuff, and they're like.
Where's Fred?
Where's Fred? You know, and he's trying. It's kind of like you know, one of my favorite movies is Old Yeller. I don't know if you ever saw the movie, but you know, Old Yeller, when that one dude decides that he's going to hang back to kind of take care of the women folk and the farm. Everybody's kind of looking at that guy like, really, dude? Yeah, and even the women are looking at him like, dude, we're good. You can go, but he doesn't want to go. You know what I mean? So he's going to make it seem like he needs to stay back.
Man, nothing will ever beat the freaking World War I in England, where if a guy was like a military-aged male and he wasn't in a freaking uniform, the women would give him a white flower. That was like the coward.
Yeah.
That's how you peer pressure your countrymen into going and getting it on. That's World War I, right? This is where you know, like, your chances of survival are minimal if you're going to go over the top over there. But that's, you know, you don't even necessarily need that. The peer pressure is going to come.
Well, it's like, I mean, you even when you read the letter that was read prior to the Battle of Shilo, I said that's exactly World War I. I mean, when you go back through and you read, you know, what he's calling out of the women, you know what I mean, of who you're defending and who you're standing up for. I mean, he's calling them out, like, you know, why you're here and who you represent. Yeah. That speech that's written out prior to that that's a pretty good one.
So the North kind of is putting it together, and they're probably of the mind that, you know, we're going to kind of get this done pretty quick. one of the first larger battles, the first Battle of Manassas, which is in Manassas, Virginia. The Union calls this the Battle of Bull Run. The Union thinks this is going to be a pretty easy victory for them rolling down there. It doesn't work out that way.
No, yeah, it's the Manassas is like a hop, skip, and a jump just south of D.C. I mean, you cross over the Potomac, you come down the Manassas Battlefield Park, beautiful part of Virginia that's in there. That same guy that we kind of talked about before with Beauregard and Anderson down there. So now Beauregard is up in Virginia.
So Beauregard was the guy that was commanding the Confederate troops at Fort Sumter during that initial attack. So now this guy Beauregard, who had just attacked his professor, his professor at West Point, now he's up at Manassas, and who's he fighting against up there?
McDowell,
who's one of his classmates.
Yeah, they're classmates together. You know what I mean? That would be like me going against some of my classmates of 2005. You know what I mean? It's just unimaginable. Now you got these two folks, and a lot of the folks back then, in some of the readings when you look at the battle of it taking place, with being novice, so you've got this voluntary force of a bunch of folks that are kind of coming in, and it's not the professional military that we kind of have of today. You know what I mean? So now you've got like a slim picking of officers. Well, a lot of the officers that resigned their commission after the Mexican-American War now are all trying to get back in. So before the battle on both sides of the fence, there, of course, you're a West Point grad, coming in, that's going to weigh heavy on selection of officers. And then you kind of look at him of like, okay, well, what did the guy do in the Mexican-American War? Okay, he was a young officer. So now you're kind of like taking like a young Marine lieutenant or Lieutenant JG in the Navy. And now we're going to make him a general. Okay, so the last time you were in charge of like 30 people, now we're going to put you in charge of like a couple of thousand people. To the upwards of, you got divisions, you've got brigades, you've got, a regiment. A regiment is set out to be somewhere around like 1,000. You know what I mean? If you've got 1,000 folks that are in there, and then you've got brigades, you've got the division, and then you've got corps, and then you've got like an army. You know what I mean? So when you're looking at like an army, it could be 60,000 people. Well, when you look at some of these guys, they haven't been in charge of 60,000 people. I mean, you know what I mean? So, like you said before, like this is a company that is growing at an extreme rate, and they're coming from all over, both the North and the South. I mean, you got folks, just like we had said earlier, that they've never left their state before. So you got folks coming as far as, from Mississippi and Alabama that are heading up into Virginia. You got folks from Connecticut. You got Maine. You got Wisconsin. I mean, you got Ohio. And these folks are trying to make their way into the capital. And then you got a lot of these guys that are coming in that are looking for positions. And a lot of them are immediately coming in. And, of course, they want to be, a general officer. Like, why not just, if you're going to go big? You know what I mean? What do you okay, you were a Lieutenant JD, now you want to be a general. Yep, that's right, man. Make me a general. And it's also because of, if you're thinking that the war is going to be short, now you got a guy that you had spoke on the last one when you talked about Sherman down at LSU. Well, Sherman's down there. Well, Sherman's got a different vision of this 90-day war kind of thing. I mean, even Winfield Scott, you know what I mean, thought that it would take, what was it, like over 60,000 people, you know what I mean, to be able to stand up. I mean, that's a lot of people to come in. And he thought it was going to take a couple of years.
Yeah, it's like 5 times bigger than what they had in 1860.
Yeah. I mean, so he's going to increase the size by at least 5 times. And he thinks it's going to even take a couple of years. So this is, your senior, I mean, if you're looking at it of like folks with military experience in the United States at that time, like Winfield Scott's the guy. You know what I mean? Zachary Taylor, they were both down the Mexican-American War, but, Winfield Scott's the guy. He stayed a professional soldier. very well respected in the administration. But then when you look at the folks that are going to come in for this first battle, they even talked of like local folks from D.C. like getting in their carriages and stuff and like following the army down because they want to go spectate.
Let's go
like,
watch.
Yeah, like this is the state fair. Like, you know what I mean? We're going to go watch. And it's just going to be, the Union's going to get routed. And then they're going to get pushed back into D.C. and that's not going to look well, for the president or for the Union. And because you're looking at recruiting aspects of it, I mean, how's it looking on the Confederacy side? Because they're going to move the capital of the Confederacy out of Montgomery and they're going to move it into Richmond, Virginia. And when you move it up into Richmond, Virginia, I mean, the distance between, I live like smack dab, Spotsylvania, Virginia, Fredericksburg is like literally in the middle between D.C. and Richmond. Mm-hmm. So now you've got these two capitals that are literally, you know what I mean, a hop, skip, and a jump from each other. And the battle is going to take place just north of Fredericksburg. So it's going to be like in between the Rappahannock River and where the Potomac River is, like right up in there of that Occoquan, Fairfax-y kind of area. So that's the area we're talking about. And the Union is going to get defeated in the first Battle of Manassas or Bull Run of how you're looking at it.
So the Union kind of realizes like, okay, we're going to need more people. Like, okay. And what's interesting, we talked about this a little bit on the last one. You got Baltimore, who is, obviously in Maryland, which is a slave state, was a slave state before they joined the Union or stay with the Union. But as the Union is trying to ship people down to fight, Baltimore is like trying to stop it from happening.
Oh yeah, I mean, like rioting. They're going to come and so they got you. So here you are. You're riding on a rail car. You're all excited. You're coming from Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, you name it. And then you get down to Baltimore, and like those people aren't happy out there that we're coming through Baltimore. So they're trying to stop the progress. You know what I mean? Talk about bringing friction in. You're learning that you've got to get people, and a lot of people, and you got to start standing up armies that are going to have to deal with this insurgency that's taking over in the Confederacy. And so these people are coming in. So yeah, the folks in Baltimore, like Maryland, it is a slave state and it's a split state. And you got to look at it as the people in Baltimore looking like their livelihoods are going to be affected. Like if this gets abolished, like we're going to have to start making another plan because now we got to what are we going to start paying people? You know what I mean? Like, what do you mean? I can't have slavery. I can't just work them. I can't own these. I mean, so this is a huge shift to a lot of folks in the United States. I mean, not that it's even close to comparison, but you and I were both working at the same time, and we were getting ready for Gettysburg, and we have a pandemic hit, and we got to go online. I mean, that was a huge shift in America. I mean, it was a new way of thinking. So this is something that's a huge way that's being pushed by the Union, and Baltimore is giving resistance. So now they're going to have to start moving some of the troops through at night. I mean, now it's got to be timed. And I always kind of look back at it as, okay, so here you are, you think you're working in. It's like when George Washington decided that, hey, we're going to stand up a Continental Army, we're going to go against the crown in England, but you still have loyalists that are in and amongst you, living next door to you. You know what I mean? So now you've got these folks that you're in Maryland, you're in Pennsylvania. Well, you've got Southern sympathizers that are living amongst you. So anything they can do to disrupt that machine as well. And then you've got, folks that, okay, who's going to run these armies? And as they come in, and of course they're all kind of jockeying for general officers. The one that I'll bring up just because I think is super cool is, when you talked about Sherman. So Sherman comes in because he's a West Pointer. He fought in the Mexican-American War, and everybody's going in straight for general. They want that, and Sherman comes out, and they're like, "Hey, dude, what'd you get?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm a colonel." They're like, "Dude, man, you could have like easily gotten general." He goes, "I'll earn general."
Check.
You know what I mean? Sherman's a different. Of course, then everybody, they're going to call him crazy. Of course, because he's not fitting the mold as everybody else. He's making those kind of statements down at modern day LSU. He's speaking truth. I mean, he's has a vision and sees what takes place. So Sherman's a different kind of guy.
He's got an elevated view of what's going on for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So as these troops are now kind of moving into position throughout from the north towards the south, you got skirmishes happening. You got, people running into Union troops. You got resistance, kind of like chance contacts going on. Cavalry will be getting into engagements, as they're out doing scout, they'll get some resistance. And then you get to the Battle of Seven Pines. This is May 31st to June 1st, 1862. General McClellan, he's popular, Little Mac. Why does everybody like General McClellan?
McClellan, calling him Little Mac. So he gets general officer, and he's going to be the commander of the Army of the Potomac. When you look at the Army of the Potomac, it's right there in Virginia, the Potomac River. If you look at like different armies or different organizations, the Army of the Potomac is the 100% manned. They get the best gear and equipment. You know what I mean? They're like varsity. Mm-hmm. They're getting all this stuff. You know what I mean? The guys that are standing up armies out west, they're JV. You know what I mean? They're not getting the attention because he's right there with the Capitol. I mean, he's right there with the president. He's got Winfield Scott. He's in the mix. And when you look at Little Mac, the interesting thing about McClellan when he becomes the Army commander of the Potomac, of course, he's got to come up with a plan. And McClellan, if you kind of look at it, McClellan was a status quo guy. He was one of those guys that kind of believed hey, dude, just let them do what they've been doing. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's an interesting, even we were talking about people in Baltimore. Status quo was a thing. Like, there's not too many people in America right now. You say, hey, are you conservative or are you liberal? There's not too many people say, hey, I kind of like it's okay the way it is. The conservatives are saying we got to bring it back to this. The liberals are we got to change that. A legitimate kind of political viewpoint at this time period was like, hey, let's just keep it what we got. Just hold what you got. Just status quo. And so you get these people that are status quo, and Little Mac being one of them. Hey, real quick, Army of the Potomac. This is just a naming convention that we need to cover right now because it can get confusing. The Union armies are named after rivers. That's their naming convention. So you're going to hear a bunch of these different armies, and sometimes it can get confusing because you got rivers in America that are called things like the Mississippi and called things like the Tennessee River. So it can get real confusing real quick. What are the Confederate armies named after? Like
the Army of Northern Virginia, the Army of Mississippi, meaning like not the.
Yep. So it's going to get a little confusing if you don't pay attention to that, but just remember that the northern armies are named after rivers. So Army of the Potomac. So General McClellan, I cut you off when you were saying that he's kind of a status quo guy, not looking to be super dynamic.
No, not at all. And I think with him, he's got political views. I mean, he ends up running for president in '64. A lot of these guys, I guess I should use the term whiff 'em. You know what I mean? If you make me a general officer, a whiff 'em is what's in it for me after the thing. So a lot of these guys are coming with a little bit of an agenda of like, okay, yeah, hey, if I join up, it's this civil war that takes place. I'm a general officer. If I serve with distinction, You know what I mean? I might gain something out of it, in the end. And I would say that plays a bigger part on the Union side than it does on the Confederate side. Like the Confederate generals that are down there, they just want to be left alone and let us run our own country. We're done with this United States thing with the Union. We're creating our own country, and we just want you guys to just leave us alone and let us just keep doing what we're doing, kind of a thing. So there's when Jefferson Davis he's unanimously picked to be the president of the Confederacy. It's not like they didn't even have it. Like there's no election. Like, does Robert E. Lee's like, man, I think that, if I serve with distinction, I'll be president of the Confederacy. Like there's nobody kind of jockeying to get rid of Davis. They just want to, hey, man, we're just, we're going to form these states in the Confederacy with Davis, and we're going to keep running how we're running. We don't need this big federal government thing kind of telling us how we're going to run and how our states are going to be ran. We're all going to be a coalition of states, and we're going to run it the way we see fit. So when McClellan gets these aspects, and if you look at the map, like I said again, like back during the Civil War, anytime we kind of look at a general officer, there's a lot of folks, there's statements that are made that amateurs study tactics, professionals study logistics, especially at that level, because you logistically have to move 120,000 people and all their stuff. So, back then, you're either going to walk them, you're going to put them on a train, or you're going to put them on a boat. And we already talked about, so you got the distance that's coming in. So after the first Battle of Manassas, you've got this McClellan, Taggart, McDowell's out, you know what I mean? And he's going to take this formed Army of the Potomac, and he's got to brief his plan to the boss. So he's going to do what he's going to do, a Peninsula campaign, which that's where we get to the Seven Pines down there. So the Peninsula, Norfolk, because you either got two choices. You either get on the Telegraph Road, which is modern day Route 1 that runs from D.C. Of course, now we got 95. So it's basically like, if you put it in today's terms, we're going to hop on 95, and in 2 hours, we're going to be in Richmond. So we can either go over by land, or we can just swoop in and around, put everybody on boats. We can float them down the Potomac out into the bay and come right. I mean, Norfolk, phenomenal naval base. And then just come right up the peninsula. So the distance, and then you got to look at okay, logistically, how am I going to support these folks? You know what I mean? Well, logistically, yeah. I mean, we've got a Navy. You can just logistically support by water. You know what I mean? It's easily supported logistically. If you look at it on the other aspects, the riverways, when you get down to the Rappahannock River, if we talk about Fredericksburg, if you blow the rail line, which the rail line are blown in Fredericksburg, you know what I mean? Now you're going to have to offload everything. It's logistically going to be a lot harder moving that much stuff. I mean, if you look at us even today in the military, I mean, we move a lot by naval. I mean, we can move cities worth of stuff. So he's going to make this decision. He's going to go down and he's going to fight the Peninsula campaign.
This is McClellan.
McClellan, yeah.
McClellan
Little Mac
says, all right, I'm going to go fight this Peninsula campaign.
Yep, I'm going to put all the guys, bunch of guys, put them on boats. We're going to float down. We're going to hop off. We're going to fight this Peninsula campaign, and it's a short A to B distance, right up, cross over the Chickahominy, and bam, man, we're up the James, and we are in Richmond. We'll overthrow the Capitol. Easy peasy. War's over, man. You know what I mean? We just took the Capitol. Well, there's a problem. The Confederates don't want to give it up that easy. So they get down there, and then they get into the distinctive Battle of the Seven Pines. That is also when, so Lee, at that time, at the beginning of the war, Lee is an advisor. He's a military advisor to Jefferson Davis. He's not a combatant commander at the time. Due to attrition, General Officer another Johnson goes down. His number 2 guy, XO, is Gustavus W. Smith, which, of course, everybody remembers old Gustavus. He was in command for about 24 hours because, as soon as Davis is like, hey, dude, what are you going to do? He's like, oh, I'm going to need more resources. Yeah, we don't have any more resources. That's not a plan. You know what I mean? Bobby, you're in. And Robert E. Lee, steps on the field to take command of the Army of Northern Virginia. He had already established a relationship with Jackson, Stonewall Jackson, and he's going to Stonewall Jackson. So he's got this threat coming in on Peninsula. So of course he's going to take this guy. And when you have a nickname like Stonewall, you know what I mean? That's like a pretty good one to get. You know what I mean? So they're going to send Jackson, and Robert E. Lee's going to send him up into the Valley. So he's going to do, there's the Valley campaign that kind of goes on. Well, Lincoln's number one worry is like D.C., protecting Baltimore, D.C. I mean, it's huge protection of D.C. Well, you get Jackson up there running around. You know what I mean?
Nothing's safe.
Nothing's safe with Jackson. And he's proven it because he's sending other armies out there to try to, Banks and some of these guys are trying to intercept Jackson. And Jackson's foot mobility of infantry is just unmatched in the Valley. It's amazing what Jackson's doing out there. The amount of movement, with Jackson, and he's winning. So the morale of underneath Stonewall Jackson is very high. Because everybody wants to play for a winning team. I mean, Jackson's becoming very popular, and just a little back history, a little bit. So Jackson, he was a professor. He taught at the Virginia Military Institute prior to the war, and as an instructor, today, you got kids, I got kids, they go to college and stuff. They got that RateMyProfessor.com stuff, and the kids can take a course. And JD's the course, and then they can go on and tell JD, oh, he sucked, I didn't like him, he was this bad. If they had RateMyProfessor.com at VMI, Jackson would have been the most hated professor at VMI.
And why is that?
He just wasn't very well liked. He was, nothing wrong with it. He was Presbyterian, extremely religious. He very strict, and I think because of some of his upbringing, he kept a lot of information close hold. He didn't trust a lot of other people, and needless to say, that could be from a lot of the peer leadership. You know what I mean? If he's not one of the guys that is not partaking in the barbecues on the weekend, you know what I mean? Sundays, he's devoted to church, family, that kind of stuff. So, he's one of those guys that just doesn't fit in with the cool club kids, you know what I mean, that are doing stupid stuff. But when Stonewall shows up, he's going to go to work. And when he goes to work, you're going to, if you're working for Stonewall Jackson, you're going to get up in the morning. You're going to get on the road. You're going to face to the right. You're going to hike anywhere between 20 to 25 miles. There's going to be a gunfight at the end. And he's going to bring the wood. And he's going to win. And then you're going to hike back out. I mean, there's that Valley campaign of the movements that guy's doing and around the Valley. You know what I mean? Like we had talked, kind of before, the terrain of, looking at some of the hills in the Shenandoah Valley area. And these guys are like no shoes. You know what I mean? Like they're doing some serious movements, and they got their home on their back, and they're moving it around and they're winning, and so Lee is going to send Jackson up in the Valley because he knows that if Jackson goes up and then the word's going to get out to Abraham Lincoln, he's going to be like, well, okay, Stonewall's in the Valley. Is he coming up the Valley? And is he going to make a threat towards Washington, D.C.? So if I'm the commander-in-chief and you're asking for more resources down there, because one thing McClellan was really good at was exaggerating the numbers. Like that dude, you know what I mean? There would be, Robert E. Lee would have 55,000 folks. Oh, he's got 110. I mean, he's gonna exploit the numbers, just insane.
So he's telling small lies, or in some cases probably big lies, in order to get more resources.
Yeah. If
this is McClellan.
Yeah, this is McClellan.
So McClellan's, gets word from his cavalry, his scouts, that there's 50,000 people. He's going to tell his boss there's 100,000 enemy fighters.
And this is his pattern.
This is his pattern.
You know what I mean? Because then that's going to delay anything that he's going to have to do. Like, I mean, the president, Winfield Scott, these guys are like, dude, when are you going to attack? Well, I mean, he's just like slow rolling, the commander in chief, because he keeps he's got that guy Pinkerton, private kind of intel guy, and of course, if you hire me, I'm going to tell you what you want to hear. Oh, there's a shitload of them there. Oh yeah, I mean, we thought it was 50,000. I heard this guy's coming from here and this guy's coming from up there. So they're going to inflate the numbers to try to get more resources. And you could see it even in the writings and in the books of his communications with his wife. McClellan is a little Napoleon. He thinks very highly of himself. And when you look at it of McClellan, and why do the troops like him? Because he's keeping them alive, because they're not doing anything. And McClellan is not one as a commander to put his personal self at risk. You know what I mean? Like, he's not going to put himself out there, and that's a pattern. You know what I mean? He's going to stay in the rear. He's not going to go out. You know what I mean? He's not going to, he's not seen, during battle that takes place out there. And so now he's going to go up against, and the problem is everybody goes to West Point, and everybody kind of knows everybody, and everybody was kind of down in the Mexican-American War. So everybody kind of knows the character of each one of these individuals. And then now you're going to bring in this guy, Bobby Lee. And Robert E. Lee, at the beginning, everybody's kind of thinking like, man, it's Robert E. Lee. Well, I mean, he had nicknames too. Down in cell block with the privates and stuff sitting around, they got this whole thing of like this digging in. Like, what's this digging in stuff? Like, what's this fortifications? What is it? That's not manly. That's not how we fight.
So Robert E. Lee is oftentimes pushing, set up defensive positions, get out your shovels, dig in. We're going to hold what we got right now, which is, in the view of the troops, the frontline troops, cowardly.
Yeah, I mean, they call him the king of spades.
As in spade shovel.
Yeah, like a spade the shovel, not like a cool spade. You know what I mean?
Didn't they call him Granny too?
Oh, yeah, Granny Lee. Because, we've talked about this before when, just you and I up at Gettysburg, Lee's in his 50s. Well, of course, yeah. When I was a kid at 8 years old, the first time I went to, VMI and I'm seeing Robert E. Lee, I'm like, man, that dude was old. Now I sit across the table from you, I'm like, that dude's in the prime of his life, man. But to the young soldiers, you know what I mean? He's this old man. So they were calling him Granny Lee. He's not the Robert E. Lee that everybody's kind of thinks about, towards, after the war and what he is. He's not as prominent. I would probably put Stonewall Jackson coming in early in the war and all the way up to 63 is probably becoming he is the most popular general in the Confederacy, Stonewall. Just because he's making the paper, he's making his name, but they're going to bring in Robert E. Lee, and Robert E. Lee, is going to he's going to defeat and push back the Army of the Potomac to where now he's going to put a dilemma on McClellan. So McClellan is going to have to make a decision of like, man, we're not going to be able to take Richmond. So do I just bring in the boats and put everybody back and go on back up to the, up the Potomac and regroup and kind of go at this again? And you could only imagine like the amount of resources and the amount of information that he's pushing up to D.C. that, the President of the United States and these guys up in D.C. are not happy with what they're kind of getting down there on the Peninsula campaign. But relieving a general officer or pulling from his command is going to be, that's a difficult decision because these guys are very well connected. Politically as well. So as they pull back off the peninsula, we end up getting the second battle of Bull Run, Battle of Manassas, and they're going to bring in other commanders that are going to come in, and at the second battle, McClellan's going to slow roll. And he's getting orders to release folks up there to take part in the battle, and he's going to slow roll the other commanders, almost kind of like sending a message of like.
So he doesn't provide support with his team to the other team that's in a pitched battle.
Right.
He decides, no, I'm not going to send you any support.
Yep.
Or okay, I'll get it started. They'll be there tomorrow or whatever. He slow rolls the execution, and they end up getting beat again.
Yep, they end up getting beat again, and then now they're going to put Lincoln into a predicament to where they're going to put him back in command. They're going to combine those armies there and bring them all underneath McClellan. There's a lot of turmoil that's going on amongst the officers. The book that we have laying here on the table, the one of Lincoln's lieutenants. It's a great read into the insights of the officers, the general officers in the Army of the Potomac, and what Lincoln is having to deal with some of these guys that just don't want. Yeah, drama. Like literally, it's the housewives of the Army of the Potomac. Like literally, like you know what I mean. Like they could have a whole episode of this stuff just going on, of just the drama that's going on in and around the general officers. And
there's. When I'm trying to help companies hire people, one of the things I advise them to do, if it's possible for them to do it, is put them in the situation that they're going to be working in. So can you hire them as a contractor for 90 days and you figure out what they're like? Even when people say, who's going to make it through SEAL training? Well, the only way to figure out who's going to make it through SEAL training is by putting them in some kind of similar situation, some kind of similar situation that is very similar to SEAL training, and then you might have an indication. So that's kind of what we got going on here. It's not like many of these senior officers, they haven't gone through the ranks, and like you said, they haven't led a platoon and then led a company and then been a battalion XO and then been a battalion commander and then gone up through the chain to where they've proven themselves. So you're throwing these guys into positions where it's like, hey, they might not be good at this job and they don't have any time to learn it. So you're going to kind of get what you get, and there's going to be drama.
Yeah, they're learning it on the fly, running around. And then, because even though you've got like these West Point guys, well, you still got to have like regimental commanders and stuff. And you're still standing these folks up that are all coming from the same hometowns. You know what I mean? So they're all joining together, the joining of arms. And then kind of at the beginning, it's kind of like, if we're here in San Diego County, and everybody's like, yeah, hey, we got 1,000 folks over here. Well, who should be the colonel? Well, let's take a vote, man. You know what I mean? I think Echo should be the colonel. Okay, he's the colonel. Now, what military background? You know what I mean? Like, you're just a good guy, and of course, people are just wanting to do the right thing. But at that level, yeah, that's a huge jump. You know what I mean? Of being in charge of that many folks. So yeah, they're trying to figure it out on the fly, and then of course people have favorites. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So you try to look out for your favorites of who the guys are.
This is the legit good old boy network on both sides, right?
Yeah. So I mean, it is very difficult, but so they push them off the Battle of Seven Pines. There's also other events that are taking place out west. You know what I mean? So the Battle of Pea Ridge out in Arkansas, up in the Ozarks, takes place in the early parts of March of 1862, and it's out the trans-Mississippi kind of area that's out there. And if you look at it in the Midwest with that expansion kind of thing, St. Louis. That's a prominent city at the time to be able to have control over that. And then, it's the playing in of that, the trans-Mississippi, the Battle of Pea Ridge. Some of us can refer to it as the Gettysburg of the West, where you have General Curtis. He's running with the Union, and he got Van Dorn out at the Battle of Pea Ridge. within inside of the battle that takes place out there, after this battle, it basically eliminates that entire region of the United States throughout the Civil War and keeps in control of the Union within inside of that region. One of the most interesting things about the Battle of Pea Ridge that took place out there is the Confederacy were able to go over to the Indian Territory in Oklahoma, and they stood up a couple of regiments of Cherokee to come fight for the Confederacy, which a lot of folks don't know. You know what I mean? I couldn't imagine the recruiting spin that was going on over there. Obviously, they're probably still a little bit upset with the whole Indian removal thing and the Trail of Tears that got them out there. So they convinced and stand up a couple of these regiments of Native Americans to come fight for the Confederacy. And it's not really recorded or thought, but I wonder if they were like, yeah, hey, dude, you guys come fight with us, man. We'll give you North Georgia back. You know what I mean? We'll move you back in. But the problem is after the Battle of Pea Ridge, they end up finding this like a small detachment of Union soldiers that are killed and scalped. And they kind of have to go to the Cherokee like, hey, dude, that's great. You guys are coming out. Plus, they didn't really conform to the whole like instant obedience to order, like the whole military thing. You know what I mean? They kind of fight different. Like, you know what I mean? We kind of do what we want to do. And what do you mean? There's no scalping. You know what I mean? So they sent them back. But there was actually Native Americans that fought for the Confederacy against the United States of America. But when they, the whole scalping thing kind of started taking place, and there was no more Confederate really threat in that Mississippi area after the Battle of Pea Ridge, held in by General Curtis, and then that secured St. Louis, which was a huge key victory. Like if you're looking at strategy, strategically, that Battle of Pea Ridge was huge for the Union. So
thinking of strategy, talk to us about the Anaconda Plan. This is Winfield Scott's, who's the northern commander of the armies. What's his plan overall on how to beat the Confederate States?
So Winfield Scott's going to come up with it gets tagged the Anaconda Plan, and you look at the anaconda. Earlier we talked about like being in Panama and seeing an anaconda, waterborne snake. It's constrictor, like something I don't want to be caught in the water with. You know what I mean? Especially that large of a snake. You've got this insurgency, if you call it, an insurgency of these Confederate states that are kind of down there. So he's going to have to kind of like throw a line around it. So, he's going to anchor the tail of the anaconda snake in Washington, D.C., and then the snake's going to run down the Potomac River. It's going to go into the Chesapeake Bay. It's going to run down and around Florida. It's going to come up the Gulf Coast and then into the Mississippi River. And that's the head of the snake is coming from west to east. So they're going to cut off resources to the Confederacy with a naval blockade. And they're going to control the riverways with these armies. So they're going to start sending armies with a Western theater campaign. So you've got the Army of the Ohio, the Army of the James, or the Ohio, the Cumberland, the Army of the Tennessee, the Army of the Gulf. You know what I mean? The Army of the Mississippi that are going to be, and then you've got the Army of the Potomac that's going to deal with this Eastern kind of theater aspect. But when you look at the Anaconda Plan, with the head of the snake coming from the west, that's the focus of main effort. Like they've got to secure the west before they can start the constrictor of the snake to the Confederacy. So, for the metaphors matter because they're memorable. So when you actually look at it on a strategic aspect of the Anaconda Plan, if you can't even read or write, you can look at the cartoon.
This is what we're doing.
Yeah. Hey, this is what we're doing. Okay, I got it. First thing we got to do is we got to control the waterways. And they're doing a pretty good job of it. So as you have some, you got the trans Mississippi with the Battle of Pea Ridge. That's kind of secure. We don't really know what we're doing over here on the East Coast with the Army of the Potomac kind of thing. We got a lot of drama going on. And then you're going to start sending these armies of the West down, to start controlling these waterways of the Cumberland River, the Tennessee River, the Mississippi River. So you're going to put these, these armies into motion. So you've got the Army of the Tennessee, you've got the Army of the Ohio. They're going to start making their way to start being the head of that snake. And that's what's going to get us into this first big battle that you kind of talked about. Like Shilo is going to be the first big show. It's kind of like, we've been looking at a little, I hate to downgrade it of kind of like it's preseason.
The other battles up to now are preseason a little bit.
Yeah, now we're going to get it. I mean, this is going to be a big show. I mean, this is going to be the Battle of Shilo out in the West. This is going to be a first of what they call, I mean, even the book that you kind of read from, called In Hell Before Night. And the other attributes of seeing the elephant. This is going to be a baptism of fire that nobody has seen. Like, we haven't seen it at this scale of what's going to take place in Shilo.
And so it's Shilo, but Shilo's not really the decisive terrain here. The decisive terrain is south of the town of Shilo. It's a city, and city's probably a strong word because I've been to Corinth, Mississippi. Corinth, Mississippi is a little town, a relatively small town, but it's got multiple railways coming in, passing through it. So it's a strategic town, and the Confederates want to protect it because, like you said, we got these big Western armies moving west, moving southwest to try and get control of the Mississippi and of the Tennessee River as well. So the Confederates know this. They know that the North is heading south. So what do the Confederates do? They move north. They push north above Corinth, Mississippi, to stop the Union forces before they get to Corinth, and they get to a place called Shilo. Shilo, Tennessee is just like a little. Is it even a town? What do you call it? Is it a town? I guess Shilo.
I don't even know if it would get the term town. Like you said,
it's an area. I guess
there's a church. So there's this little Shilo church,
and then there's a landing area called Pittsburgh Landing, which is on the Tennessee River. And as Grant and his army push down, this is where they decide they're going to pull in. They're going to pull in because, again, they're looking at this metropolitan area, not so much Corinth, but it's a strategic area, like I said. So that's General Grant, and then you got another Northern general, General Buell, who's leading the Army of the Ohio. And what they're trying to do, they're both trying to get there. They're both trying to get to Corinth, Mississippi. They're both pushing south. Grant gets there first. On the other side, who you got? You got Johnson and Beauregard. Beauregard's mobile, huh? That guy's getting all over the place, huh?
Well, yeah, and when Beauregard after at the beginning, yeah, he's there at the beginning, but then you start to notice that anybody that's sent to the Western theater is like what we call like the land of the misfit toys. You know what I mean? Like,
it's like get stationed in Siberia if you're if you're in the Russian army.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Like, so a lot of if you're gonna shit can somebody, you send them west. Mm-hmm. Now, like when you look at like the guys like we talk like you talk about Grant. You know what I mean? Grant. Of coming up. when you look at it of like, man, what was Ulysses S. Grant doing in 1860? The guy was a complete. Pretty much, he was having a hard time in life at that point. You know what I mean? He had fought, West Point guy, fought in the Mexican-American War, got sent out to California. You know what I mean? There's folks talking about, a drinking problem that Grant has. Of course, Grant had lost a son. So a lot of the times when I've never lost a child, but I'm pretty sure it's going to have a pretty big effect on me. And how I'm going to handle that, I really don't know. So you got this guy Ulysses S. Grant that's showing promise, but he's selling firewood on the streets of St. Louis before the war breaks out to try to support his family. Because he's not really good in the civilian world, of being a business guy. He's just not. He's struggling. You know what I mean? Which there's tons of people, man, that struggle.
Right.
But at least he's selling firewood and stuff. So when the war breaks out, he's like, I'm back in. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, whew. So let's head out and let's see if I can. Of course, but now you got your reputation. You know what I mean? So. What's interesting is when we talked about Grant, then we talked about Sherman. We talked about Sherman earlier. He's crazy, Grant's a drunk. But the two of them kind of stick together, and it's this dude ends up on a $50 bill. He's the president of the United States. He becomes the chief of all the army. I hate to be a spoiler alert of Grant, but from a dude selling firewood on the streets of what he rose to, perseverance comes to mind. People might talk shit about him. He's going to show up and he's going to come to work. But he's got a lot of struggles to deal with. He's never been in charge of this many people. So, Grant's going to make his way down, and he's having some success. He's working with the naval Captain Foote. And they're actually working together, Army and Navy, which is, kind of odd. You can bring in naval ships and bombard, which is pretty cool. Naval gunfire, if you will, brings them in and Grant's the ground force, but he's using them as transportation. So, between Grant and Foote, I think they're working really well together. But then, you talked about with Buell. So he's another Army commander. So they're like peers. So neither one of them work with each other. And you know how that kind of works with peers. Sometimes you go to your peer for some support and he's like, dude, I don't work for you. You know what I mean? I got to get shit from the boss. Tell me what to do. He is trailing Grant, but everybody's focused on the same mission. When you look at the overall arching strategy of Abraham Lincoln, it was preserve the Union. So that's his message to everybody. The only thing we're going to do is preserve the Union. So these guys, they're out moving. They're learning along the way. And you got Ulysses S. Grant. So they got and you've been to Corinth. I've been to Corinth. I think you probably had to do the same thing. You got to fly into Memphis and drive a couple hours over because there's just no easy way to get to Corinth. But when you look at the supply depots of railways and waterways, and you're trying to supply these armies of thousands of people, and you look at the Western theater of the Tennessee River, the Cumberland River, the Ohio, and the Mississippi, we kind of look at it as where are you going to store this stuff? So if you're going to bring it in by boat, so you got Nashville, that's a big hub. You got Memphis, that's a big hub, and then you've got where you go north to south. So Corinth is right at the very top of Mississippi, just right below that southeastern Tennessee kind of area, and it's just not an easy place to get to. So if you're going to come in and you're going to strategically, one, you got to get all your people there. So Grant's going to put them on a boat. They're going to float down the Tennessee River. And then you got to look for a landing. Well, and of course, you don't want to land too close because you want to get everybody off the boat before, any of the Confederates come. Because if you're just sitting on the boat, that's going to make it pretty easy for the Confederacy. So they're going to pick Pittsburgh Landing. And even still to this day, like you said, there's nothing in Shilo, a little church. That's it. I'm even trying to think in modern day today, there's nothing. There's a Hagee's Catfish Hotel down the road a bit. And that's about it. Great catfish, but other than that, there's just nothing there. So he's going to bring his folks in, and they're going to offload right there at Pittsburgh Landing, and that landing. I mean, even if you and I like looking at it today, it's like, man, that's insert and extract is usually the worst places to get hit. Mm-hmm. So coming in, so it's like one of those landings downriver, and then it's like the cliffs over where I'm staying. Mm-hmm. So it's like getting dropped off there, and then I've got this little straight up ahead. So I'm already. There's high ground above Pittsburgh Landing. You know what I mean? So getting folks off and then getting them up on the landing and then establishing a foothold is his first priority. And nothing against Ulysses S. Grant. Like, again, man, this is right at the beginning. But Grant's going to kind of go up there, and there's not going to be a lot of order and discipline going on. It's kind of like, hey, guys, get off the boat. You know what I mean? They go up there and they set up camp. You know what I mean? Because this is their first rodeo. Like they're having fun on the way down, riding on the boat ride. You know what I mean? They're coming in. They're like, oh, man, this is going to be an easy day. You know what I mean? So I think that their expectations just like really aren't there. You know what I mean? So they're all going to get, of course, that they don't know either. I mean, look at the last war they fought in. It was the Mexican-American War, and we saw how that went. You know what I mean? We were pretty, other than, like the Battle of San Pascal that took place out here with Kearney and Pico kind of put the wood to him. And, if it wasn't for, that little guy, Kit Carson, that got him out of it when he stalked from out there all the way into the bay to link up with the Navy to get relief to come out to get him. So these guys are getting off the boat, and there's not really a lot of order and discipline. So it's kind of like, if I was going to describe it like what it looked like a very unorganized yard sale.
So that's what they do. They're there. Now, meanwhile, on the other side, you got General Johnson, and he's, this is the guy that we kicked off this is the speech. This guy is engaged, right? And he tells his troops, before the battle, tonight we will water our horses in the Tennessee River.
Love it.
Yeah. So this guy is ready to get it on. And they meet. And a great book and a great account of this is Company H by Sam R. Watkins. This guy is a Confederate soldier, and he's got a great first-person account to kind of explain what's going on and what this looks like this first day. So here we go. This was the first big battle in which our regiment had ever been engaged. I do not pretend to tell of what command distinguished itself, of heroes, of blood and wounds, of shrieks and groans, of brilliant charges, of cannon captured, etc. I was but a private soldier, and if I happened to look to see if I could find anything out, eyes right, guide center was the order. Close up, guide right, halt, forward, right oblique, left oblique, halt, forward, guide center, eyes right, dress up promptly in the rear, steady, double quick, charge bayonets, fire at will, is about all that a private soldier ever knows of battle. And when I read that for the first time, that's just like horrifying, right? You're in this massive battle and you're just hearing orders. And we, when you and I marched, when I marched in Navy boot camp, and when you marched in Marine Corps boot, and you learn how to guide right, and you're kind of out of the corner of your eye, you're looking at the guy to the right of you to make sure you're staying even with him. You can't, it's hard to take that mentality and then you take it into like a combat situation where there's, ball coming at you, guys getting their legs blown off. Horrifying. And that's what this guy's dealing with. He says he can see the smoke rise and the flash of battle of the enemy's guns, and he can hear the whistle of the mini and cannonballs. But he has got to load and shoot as hard as he can tear and ram cartridge, or we'll soon find out, like the Irishman who had been shooting blank cartridges when a ball happened to strike him and he hollowed out, "Faith, Pat, and be jabbers. Them fellows are shooting bullets." But I nevertheless remember many things that came under my observation in this battle. I remember a man by the name of Smith stepping deliberately out of the ranks and shooting his finger off to keep out of the fight. So you guys he's documenting some cowardice. A guy shooting off his own finger so he doesn't have to fight. Of another poor fellow who was accidentally shot and killed by the discharge of another person's gun. And of others suddenly taken sick with colic. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. As we advanced on the edge of battlefield, we saw a big fat colonel of the 23rd Tennessee Regiment, badly wounded, whose name, if I remember correctly, was Matt Martin. He said to us, "Give 'em goss, boys. That's right, my brave 1st Tennessee. Give 'em hail, Columbia." We halted but a moment, and I said, "Colonel, where are you wounded?" He answered in a deep bass voice, "My son, I am wounded in the arm, in the leg, in the head, in the body, and in another place which I have a delicacy in mentioning." That is what the old gallant colonel said. About noon, a courier dashed up and ordered us to go forward and support General Bragg's center. We had to pass over the ground where troops had been fighting all day. I had heard and read of battlefields, seen pictures of battlefields, of horses and men, of cannon and wagons, all jumbled together, while the ground was strewn with dead and dying and wounded. But I must confess that I never realized the pomp and circumstance of the thing called glorious war until I saw this. Men were lying in every conceivable position. The dead lying with their eyes wide open, the wounded begging piteously for help, and some waving their hats and shouting for us to go forward. It all seemed to me a dream. I seemed to be in some sort of haze when sizz, 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 the mini balls from the Yankee line began to whistle around our ears, and I thought of the Irishman when he said, "Sure enough, those fellows are shooting bullets." Down we would drop, first one fellow and then another, either killed or wounded. When we were ordered to charge bayonets, I had been feeling mean all morning, as if I had stolen a sheep. But when the order to charge was given, I got happy. I felt happier than a fellow does when he professes religion at a big Methodist camp meeting. I shouted. It was fun then. Everybody looked happy. We were crowding them. One more charge, their lines waver and break. They retreat in wild confusion. We were jubilant. We were triumphant. Officers could not curb the men to keep them in line. Discharge after discharge was poured into the retreating line. The Federal dead and wounded covered the ground. When, in the very midst of our victory, here comes an order to halt. What? Halt after today's victory? Sidney Johnson killed, General Gladden killed, and a host of generals and other brave men killed, and the whole Yankee army in full retreat? These 4 letters, H-A-L-T. Oh, how harsh they did break upon our ears. The victory was complete, but the word halt turned victory into defeat. So it's mayhem out there, and like you said, you know, this is seeing the elephant. These guys are seeing this hardcore combat for the first time, and as you can hear in that description from Watkins, you know, the Confederates dominate day one. They dominate, they push, and they get the upper hand. They push Grant all the way back to Pittsburgh Landing. I mean, they push him back. Sam Watkins mentions that General Johnson's dead. So he had been wounded, hitting the femoral artery and bleeds out. And Beauregard, after this first day, so the first day, the Union forces had pushed in from the Tennessee, but now they get pushed all the way back, and Beauregard thinks they won, and actually sends the message out to Jefferson Davis. Sends a message to Jefferson Davis saying, "Hey, we just won a big battle here."
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, he's like, it's basically going into halftime, and he's claiming victory. When I love the Company H Sam White, because it's a first account from a soldier that's just a rifleman. You know what I mean? And his perspective, and when he talks about, like later on we'll talk about Braxton Bragg, and I mean that guy he's a character within himself. It's amazing he got a base named after him, but they didn't call JD to ask about naming of bases. But when you look at it of Bragg, I mean he's talking about those numerous assaults of what he came into behind. So Braxton Bragg, there's a section of the battle that's called the Hornet's Nest down there, and it's like if you could imagine, like Pittsburgh Landing's been there, it's all farm country. I mean, you've been in that region before that's down there. So when folks are coming in, there's like these old like farming roads and the farm fields. So if you could imagine, just over time, you've got, the wagons have been running these same little 2-track rails, and they start to get like sunken down a little bit. So it just gives you just a little bit of that micro terrain defilade. Mm-hmm. And that's where, Prentice and his guys, he's going to put his division that's there. And I mean, Braxton Bragg's he's going to knock against that surface numerous times throughout the battle.
Just frontal assault.
Just frontal. I mean, You hit a surface. Why not try to find a gap? Like, where's the gap in the road? And he's going to numerous times. He's going to send them up there, and they, of course, you beat your head that many times against the wall, and you just keep throwing resources. So that's what kind of Sam is seeing, just the carnage that's taking place. Like I said, I mean, nobody had seen this kind of carnage on a battlefield. And this is day one. And the Confederates are going to push them back, but at a cost. Like they're going to take a huge cost for this. And again, Johnston, when you look at Albert Sidney, there's a lot of folks, like when you go down there to Shilo, they're like, well, JD, mean a commander should never put himself at that kind of risk, that close. But there's a point in time to where the commander's got to get out of the tent, and the troops, he needs to be seen, and he's going to put himself at risk. And he's going to take a shot, and in the saddle, it's not going to unhorse him. He's basically just going to, but he never leaves the field, which kind of says something about Johnson. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Of getting injured. I mean, you got other folks that are looking to just, get a scratch and they're out. You know what I mean?
Shoot their finger off, yeah.
Yeah, shooting the finger off, that kind of stuff. So Johnson knows that his place in battle, one, if you could imagine with, you've got these novice folks that are out there, this is their first battle, and then they're going to overrun the Union. And, and like I said earlier, Grant's kind of running a yard sale up there. So these dudes are brewing up ramen, you know what I mean? They're cooking up some hardtack. They got a little bit of fat. And then these guys are going to overrun them, and they're probably hungry, and they're seeing all this free gear. You know what I mean? Like, gear adrift is a gift. You know what I mean? Like, if your name ain't on it, I'm taking it.
So the Confederate troops push through, overrun much of what the Union's got set up, and there's just looting about to go down.
Oh yeah, they're looting. You know what I mean? It's like, man, that's a better rifle than the one I got. I'm taking that one. So they're kind of looting, and Johnson and them are actually trying to stop the looting because it's distracting from the battle. Like, okay, look, man, we got it, dude. Like, they got a lot of cool stuff, but let's keep pushing them. And Johnson actually, it's recorded, they talk about Johnson, he ends up taking a tin cup because he doesn't, these guys are, they're just a bunch of privates, man. They really don't know what they're doing. They're just out there following orders, man, and they're putting them into this first big battle, and he takes a cup as if like he's gonna loot along with them. You know what I mean? And he raises that cup, and then he rides the line with that cup. And he's tinking the tops of their bayonets, kind of inspiring them of he's out there with them on the battle, and he ends up taking a shot and then bleeding out. And it's not one of his staff officers, kind of like it's like me looking across the unit. It's like, Jocko, man, you're looking kind of pale about right now, and you're bleeding out. They pull him down into a little ravine, get him out of sight of everybody, and pull him off the saddle. And he's done training. He dies right there on the field. So then now you've got Pt. Beauregard, basically the second in command, is now, it's kind of almost as if, like, when you look at it in the readings, when Beauregard kind of finds out that Johnson's dead, you'd see me have a little bit more remorse of, like, I mean, Johnson's a good commander. You know what I mean? But, Pt. Beauregard, like you said, I mean, and Sam Watkins calls it out of, like, what's this halt? Like, why aren't we just crushing this army? Why are we not keep pushing forward? Because you just lost the commander. And when no one's there giving a command, people just stop because they don't know. You know what I mean? Even though, like, it kind of boggles me a little bit, because if you tell me, like, if you're like, hey, JD, we're going to water our horses on the Tennessee River, then even if I don't hear from you for the entire rest of the day,
you know what to do.
I know exactly
what to do. I'll see you at the Tennessee River.
Yeah, I'll be there watering my horse, man. You know what I mean? You get there and be like, hey, Jocko, what up?
It's the ultimate commander's intent. Right
there. I got it. You don't have to tell me anything else. I just know I need to get to the Tennessee River, and anything in between me and the Tennessee River, I need to kill. Period. And I got my horse. I'm at the Tennessee River. We're there. Because, they also, they're worried about, this guy of, like, okay, because just like gathering intel, okay, where's Buell? Because there's another army out there. I mean, that's a huge factor to anybody, whether it's Johnson, whether it's Beauregard, you've got another army out there moving around like that. That's another force you have to contend with.
Yeah. That's like you're on the football field and there's another team that's going to come and get on the field against you.
Yeah.
You want to finish off the guys that are there.
Yeah.
They don't do that.
No.
That's where this halt comes in. And these guys kind of just, they stop. They halt. They hold up. And while this is happening, I mean, first of all, the Union brings in these gunboats for the night and starts shelling, which is apparently ineffective, other than the fact it's just mayhem and noise and, I'm sure some casualties. You're not sleeping very well and you're getting shelled, even if it's inaccurate. You got Nathan Bedford Forrest. Nathan Bedford Forrest, this guy, he's out doing reconnaissance. And he actually discovers Buell. Like he finds out that Buell's coming.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He
and starts trying to tell everybody, Buell's coming. Here comes this other army. Hey, boss, Buell's coming. No, the whole other army's coming our way. This isn't good. No one listens to him.
Yeah, and remember, last night when we were kind of chatting about Forrest, remember, like, he put on Union uniforms and got, like, in reconnaissance. So he's got eyes on Buell coming in, and he's reporting it up his chain. Now, Nathan is not a West Point grad, so he's not in the club. You know what I mean? He's not very well educated.
Well, all right, we got to talk about Nathan Forrest. Tell us a little bit about this guy, because he's a character.
He is. Well, I'd like to explain to a lot of folks, like, nobody really knew who Nathan Bedford Forrest was until Tom Hanks came out with the movie Forrest Gump. And right at the beginning of the movie, you know what I mean, you got, Tom Hanks, and he's talking about his great-great-great-great-grandfather that, fought in the Civil War and was a general officer, and then he rode around with sheets on and stuff like that. And everybody was kind of like sitting there with their iPad, and they were like, let me Google search that real quick. Wow, this guy, he's got a little bit of a backstory to him. So Nathan, he's Tennessee guy, not educated formally, but at the beginning of the war, when they're calling to arms, Nathan Bedford, I mean, he's first one out. Like, yep, but I'm coming in. I'm in, coach.
He's not educated, but he's wealthy, right?
Oh, he's wealthy. He's a millionaire in 1860
from the slave trade.
From slave trade.
And he shows up, no real military experience,
none,
but he's ready to go.
He's a private. He just wants to sign up and just make me a rifleman. I just want to go kill Yankees because this is going to go against my way of life. And, of course, the folks that are there, like Nathan is well known. You know what I mean? That kind of guy banging that kind of money back then. And he's, of what he's doing with inside the slave trade. And he's a very known individual. So, of course, the folks are in there and they're like, hey, man, that's Nathan out there. Now, of course, like nobody because Nathan doesn't come from prominent family, you know what I mean? Like dirt poor. Like the guy's just doesn't come from a prominent family. So even though he's got money, you know what I mean? It's new money. You know what I mean? He's not like old money South. You know what I mean? It's like been around for like a long time. It's Virginia, like where I live. We still got old money, Virginia. So he's not old money. He's new money. But they're just like, hey, man, you can't be a private. So they're like, well, the dude's got a whole bunch of money. We don't have a lot of money. We're starting up. So why don't you like stand up a cavalry regiment? And how about spend your money and outfit all of them? And Nathan's like, okay, I'm down with that. Make me a colonel. Yep, I'll take this on. So Nathan, he doesn't have the military background, so he doesn't know that like what he's supposed to be doing. So like all he knows is like his job. I'm cavalry. I do reconnaissance, but he's a little different than other cavalry guys because he likes to fight, and he's got no qualms about leading charges. He's not the guy that's going to be found about because again, he doesn't know. So while everybody else is halting and they're looting the camps, getting out the bacon, breaking out the banjos, Nathan Bedford's running reconnaissance efforts, and his son's with him. You know what I mean? And they're going to put on Union uniforms. They're going to get close in reconnaissance, and they're going to see Buell coming in, and he's going to report these up to higher, and nobody's listening to him. That other guy I talked about that was at the Hornet's Nest with the Union that was giving Braxton Bragg a lot of that resistance was Prentice. And Prentice, he was commanding the 6th Division of the Army of Tennessee, working for Grant. There that first day, Prentice gets captured. So he's a prisoner of war, and he's actually in the camp, in the tents, because, back then, of course, they're going to segregate. You know what I mean? Enlisted guys, you're going to a certain prisoner of war camp. The officers, you get to hang out in the tent with us because we all went to West Point together, and we'll catch you up. Totally different, aspect of being a prisoner of war when you look at officer versus the enlisted side. So Prentice is literally in the tent and even telling the officers that, hey, dude, Buell is on his way. Like, he's coming, like, now. And they're like, dude, you're full of shit, basically. Like, you know what I mean? Like, no, he's not. We've got reports. He's over in, like, Decatur, Alabama area. And he goes, look, dude, whatever reports you're getting is wrong. You're going to see tomorrow. So not only are they getting, like, told from their own reconnaissance efforts, they're getting told from a prisoner of war that they just fought against all day, and he's telling them. And they're still not taking any of this into regard. And that night, like you said, so they're going to pull up 2 naval gunboats, and they're going to start lobbing naval gunfire throughout the night, and Buell is going to show up at Pittsburgh Landing. And, of course, he's seeing that mayhem. I mean, you got these guys that are from Grant, and I mean, they're literally running for their lives. I mean, they got folks that are hanging on to. Remember, I told you about the embankment. So it would be like us going out there, you know what I mean, like right across on the cliffs. And like, I am so scared for my life that I just ran through San Diego, and I'm just hanging on to the sides of the cliff just to get away from this, man. I mean, it's complete and utter fear for their lives of what they've seen that day on the first day of battle. So then you got this other Army commander, Buell, shows up. Well, you know how those guys are, like, what are you guys doing?
What'd you screw up?
Yeah. And then, of course, anytime you got a bad day, it just starts torrential downpour. So right around like 2200 at night, man, it's just pissing out of a boot. I mean, it's just not a good day. It's raining on Grant's parade, and who comes over? Tecumseh Sherman is there with Grant, and Grant doesn't go get on a boat. He doesn't even get in a tent. I mean, it's like literally like right above Pittsburgh Landing. Like there's these just large oaks that are still sitting there. And every time I'm standing there, I could always imagine just Grant sitting there, just underneath cover. He's in his wool coat, and it's just raining. He's just thinking about his day's events. And, Tecumseh Sherman comes over, and it's just not a good day. And he looks at Sherman, and he's like, we'll whoop him tomorrow, Comp. So even though Grant, ran a yard sale, he did that, he's owning it. And the only good thing about when Buell shows up with his army, even though they're peers, they both have the same mindset. They're attacking in the morning. Like, we're going offensive against this Confederacy. So, that shows that gives you a little glimpse into this guy they call Ulysses S. Grant. He just got routed. They took all of his stuff. So I couldn't imagine the morale of the private soldier at that time. Like, you know what I mean? Like, anytime, like, you ever been, like, you're without your gear and it's cold, wet, and miserable, and you don't have your stuff. Like, JD's just not a happy camper anymore.
So that's what happens. The next day, Buell and Grant, even though they're both independent commanders of their own troops, they both go on the attack, and they're able to push the Confederates all the way back to Corinth. Now, this character, Nathan Bedford Forrest, he gets assigned to hold rear guard. And a little excerpt here from the book, which I actually read from already today. It's called Shilo in Hell Before Night. And there's a section in here worth reading. So the Confederates are retreating. Nathan Bedford Forrest and his troops are holding rear guard, just trying to keep the pressure off the troops, the Confederates, as they retreat. And this is going to the book. As the Federal skirmishers began picking their path through the fallen timbers and became somewhat disorganized and momentarily preoccupied, Forrest seemed to sense it was time to act. Shouting to his men, "Charge!" he led the way as the cavalry thundered toward Sherman's men. Some of the Union skirmishers panicked and fled. Others were blasted by shotguns and pistols as the rebel horsemen rode them down. The fury of the charge also turned back the 4th Illinois Cavalry, and Forrest, seemingly carried away by exhilaration of combat, was waving his sword and shouting, "Charge! Charge!" as he kept after them. His men, seeing the strong front of the oncoming brigade, were not following, however, and Forrest was galloping alone directly into the ranks of the main Federal force. He should have been killed. Federal infantry swarmed all about him, trying to shoot him or drag him from his horse. The horse was kicking and rearing. Forrest was slashing right and left. Even when a soldier managed to place his gun up against Forrest's hip and pull the trigger, the blast lifting the commander high in his saddle and the bullet lodging against his spine, the action did not unhorse him or stop him. Turning his horse around and clearing a path with his saber, Forrest plowed back in the direction from which he came. As he was emerging from the mass of blue infantry, he reached down, grabbed an enemy soldier by the collar, swung the man onto the horse, and used him as a shield as he galloped away. Once out of range of the Union fire, Forrest flung the man to the ground and rode up to the ridge to the point where his command was waiting in amazement. Sherman, too, was amazed, as well as disgusted. But that was neither the first nor the last time that devil Forrest, as Sherman came to call him, cheated death, though perhaps never more spectacularly than at the fallen timbers. So that's what this guy, Nathan Bedford Forrest, he earned a hell of a reputation that day. Now, before we get too excited about the heroics of Nathan Bedford Forrest, we also have to note that this is the guy that founded and started and was the first Grand Wizard of the KKK. And so when Forrest Gump talks about his great-great-great-great-grandfather and talks about him riding around in sheets after he fought in the Civil War, that's what he's talking about. But with that, the Confederates retreated. They were defeated. This is the battle that, like you were saying, this was sort of now we're in the big leagues. At the end of the battle, killed, wounded, and missing totaled 24,000 between both sides. And there's a book about the Battle of Shilo. It's called Seeing the Elephant. And it's written by a guy named Joseph Allen, or two guys, Joseph Allen Frank and George A. Reeves. And they have a footnote about this expression, seeing the elephant, which I think I mentioned already. And they say in this footnote, seeing the elephant was a euphemism for experiencing combat, the earliest source of which can be traced to the 3rd century BC, when Alexander the Great's soldiers defeated King Porus's elephant-born troops in the Indus Valley. Seeing the elephant. Well, the war had taken a turn at this point, and it was about to get worse. With that, we will continue this journey on the next Civil War excursion. And if you want to support this podcast, go to JockoStore.com, JockoFuel.com, OriginUSA.com, EchelonFront.com, and TheOMNA.com. And until next time, this is JD and Jocko. Out.